We're going over the top of Mingus Mountain. We're going into some riparian areas like you see behind me. It is later in the season, so we've already had a hard freeze at most locales. So some of the plants you're going to see have completed their growing season if they were a warm season plant, and others that are evergreens, trees, and shrubs, they are just kind of reaching the dormancy state for this time of year. So come with me, we'll look at some of the cool plants that Arizona has to offer. Again, across Mingus Mountain, in through the Chino Valley area, and then some lower elevations towards the Verde Valley. All right, let's journey. This is common cattail, Typha latifolia. Let's go down here to the edge of this small pond and take a look. This plant grows in large clumps with erect stems that emerge above the water in aquatic environments. It can also grow next to streams. Its habitat in shallow water ponds and edges of lakes and streams. It spreads underground by rhizomes, so once it's there, it forms a large colony. It's perennial, it's grass-like, and the leaves are 2 inches wide. The male flower forms a spike, and the female flower is followed by this structure that looks kind of like a corn dog. It can get 5 to 9 feet tall, and in Arizona, the low elevation is 3,500 feet. It grows up to 8,200 feet. There are hundreds of tiny flowers packed together. When they are released, there's large yellow-orange fluff that exits the seed head. This is cattail. Salix Gooding Eye, or Gooding Willow. It's a small tree in our area, never more than 50 feet, and many times bushy and small, like in the upper Verde. It blooms early in the spring, and it has yellow catkins on the male trees, and then it has green female flowers yielding cottony seeds on the female trees. It's often called Western Black Willow when not called Gooding Willow. This tree is native, and it's very important willow in Arizona. It's the largest native willow. It's important for wildlife species such as nesting birds. Our southwestern willow flycatcher, an endangered species, prefers to nest in this tree. This is desert marigold, or Bailea multiradiata. It blooms March through October, so it's a warm season bloomer. It has these very gray, delicate foliage, and it has yellow flowers that are very attractive. It can grow in the lowest deserts up into the mid elevations and puts down copious amounts of seed after a decent spring in the low elevations or a good monsoon in the higher elevations where it puts out lots of flowers. Russian thistle, Salcella iberica, is a really bad invasive in our area. Typically, it's less than about 4 feet tall, but I've seen them as tall as 5 to 6 feet tall in a monsoon-filled warm summer. I've seen them as small as 5 or 6 inches tall, with seeds on them even, trying to tumble around from a dry year. They sprout in early spring and tend to catch the last winter rains or winter snows to germinate, which is unique for a warm season annual. They do bloom summer through fall, and the flowers kind of get purpley looking. They grow in disturbed ground, so land that has been scraped clear of native flora, cleared lots, and roadsides. They tumble. That's why they're called tumbleweed. It's a pest weed for sure, and this plant was imported here many years ago, and it's been with us ever since. So when you think of the West, don't initially think of tumbleweeds. They've only come here because they've been imported with grain from Russia. The prickly plants dry up in the winter, break off in the ground to form wind-swept tumbleweeds that scatter their seeds as they go. This is buffalo gourd, Cucurbita fodotissima. It is sometimes called coyote gourd. It can spread as far as 20 feet long in a moist summer. It is in the gourd family, so it can pollinate any squashes, anything in the Cucurbita family. It blooms in spring and summer, and it's often found roadsides like the one I found here. The blooms are deep yellow, and the fruit and seeds were eaten by Native Americans. It has a strong, disagreeable odor, and it's oftentimes eaten by buffaloes and coyotes when there is nothing else available because it has a large tuber underground, it can store energy, and it can even grow through a summer with very little moisture. This is salt cedar, Tamarix pendatra. It is a tree in our area, but it can often be bushy. It's very invasive. When you take a look at the flowers and the stem, you'll notice that the tree has some attractive look to it. However, don't let that fool you. This tree has gotten into our native riparian areas and outcompeted native species. The upper verde has been cleared multiple times by work crews tracking the species, and it continues to flourish. It grows from areas up on the Navajo Reservation all the way along the Colorado River to the lower elevations and the lowest desert areas. This is a very bad species and we need to keep it in check. This is puncture vine, Tribulus terrestris. This plant has frozen down a bit, but it still left evidence of its wickedness. Here's a picture of its flowers and leaves. This is a very obnoxious invasive weed. It lives in disturbed earth, weedy fields and roadsides like this one is located right at our Chino Valley Agribusiness campus. It's incredibly painful to step on. It gets tracked, punctures your bicycle tires, your pet's paws. The seed pods grow 4 bolt heads in a circle. When it's mature, it breaks up into 4 separate instruments of torture. The plant is naturalized from the Mediterranean. It is a pest plant wherever it resides in the US. In Europe, the plant has been used in folk medicine throughout history, treating such a wide range of conditions as headache, nervous disorders, constipation, and sexual dysfunction. In China, it has been touted for use in liver, kidney, urinary, and cardiovascular remedies. So a bad plant for the environment and possibly a good plant for medicinal uses.
All right, this is red stem fillery. It is a fall germinator. It has a crazy seed head that actually drills itself down into the ground when it gets wet in the fall. We haven't had good moisture, so this one happens to be growing in conjunction with some agricultural watering. This plant has gotten an early start, thinks it's good fall rain. And you can see this plant is really ferny. It holds close to the ground. It holds tight to the ground when it's cold out. The leaves will stand up and be upright, catching the sun when it's warmer out. But here in the shade, it's holding flat to the ground. It is an invasive species, and in the spring, it comes up with pink little flowers. It's in the geranium family, so it holds these attractive pink flowers up over the top, but it's a trick. Those in turn into the drilling seeds, and the way this lays flat, it outcompetes other native species. This is an annual. It's a cool season annual, so it'll grow through the winter, bloom in the spring, and then seed will disperse by May, June in our area. It has a kind of a taproot on it. You can see it almost looks like a carrot there, but it is just a seasonal weed. This is red stem fillery. Here's field bindweed in an agricultural setting. It's probably all interconnected by one tuber under the ground. This looks like it's been cut off and come up in multiple places. Field bindweed is an agricultural nemesis, and so it can bind up equipment. That's why they call it field bindweed. It's a warm season perennial tuber, so it comes back year after year. This one is growing back after being cultivated and cut off. It has frozen in this area, so this plant is This one is really frozen down. This one's still tending a little green. It gets a white flower like the one shown in this picture from the warm season. Kind of fades to pink as well. But the plant travels around on the ground, and if it catches onto a fence or something, it'll twine up a fence, makes its flowers. The flowers, oftentimes people call them morning glories, so they're kind of attractive, but it just spreads more invasive bindweed progeny. So this is definitely a bad one for our area, and there's no real good way to get rid of it short of spraying it. You can't suppress it. It takes years and years and years to suppress with cultivation, because cutting it off just makes it mad and it pops up in 3 or 4 other places. So it takes a long time with diligent to get rid of this type of invasive, and it's a bad one.
This is Yucca elata, or soap tree yucca. It typically gets about 6 feet tall in our area, although they can be shorter. They do make a flowering spike that could go up another 4 to 5 feet, like you see in this video. The flowers are white when they're in bloom, and they're followed by a chambered seed pod. They grow in grasslands and desert area, and the leaves were used for basket making by Native Americans. The flowers are edible, and the roots can be used to make soap.
Behind me is a very distinct species, Quercus gambleri. This is our gamble oak. In Arizona, it is one of the oaks that go deciduous, so they drop their leaves in the winter. It's very important for wildlife because it makes acorns in the fall. It's interesting, those acorns drop in the fall, the leaf litter falls down over them. They put down a taproot in the fall and get anchored, and then in the spring, the first thing that comes up is the sprout, and oftentimes that'll come up potentially even above the snow, but it pushes up through the leaves. So gamble oak is pretty cool. As you can see, the trunks get pretty big. I've seen them this big around in Arizona, but a lot of times they're more scrubby, and they often come up from the roots. So this is gamble oak. Here are the acorns. They're still a little green, but they're almost viable. I took this one out of this cap, which holds it. You can see how they sucker from the roots. They often root clone, and so these two could be clones of each other. There could be one tree just expressed in 2 different main sprouts, but you can see if this is let go, there's a whole bunch of these wouldn't be seedlings, these would be pieces of the root that are popping up. And I mean by let go, I mean if there's wildfire that clears them off, or if animals browse them, they'll never get going and they'll stay small. But again, this is an awesome tree for Arizona. Gamble oak, a species of great wildlife interest, food possibility, and for human use. It's part of the ponderosa pine community as well, but gamble oaks can be quite prevalent. For fuel wood, people often, because it's a hardwood, people often look for Arizona oak, but there's gamble oak. There's a lot of rules surrounding the diameter and whether it's dead or not. These things, when they die standing, they become what's called a snag, and they don't want people to cut them down. So they only allow cutting of down gamble oak.
This is the Alligator Juniper, Juniperus depiana. I found this tree not far away from the gamble oak, and it often grows in just a little bit below the ponderosa pine setup, but above junipers and pinyon pines. You'll find these bands of alligator junipers. The bark is very distinct. It makes a yellowish cone for the male that spreads the pollen. The female berries are up to 1/2 inch long, containing 4 seeds. It is a native, and it does occur at higher elevations than most of our junipers in Arizona. It grows about 45 feet tall if it finds a happy spot. This is Arizona white oak, Quercus arizonica. This is a beautiful species that can get up to 50 feet tall. and it holds its leaves year-round as an evergreen, which is unique and distinguishes it from the gamble oak. It does live in the mountains above 5,500 feet. I found this one on Mingus Mountain near the summit. The male blooms have catkins, and the female flowers are followed by the acorns. It is called Arizona oak as well. It is native, and the acorns mature in 2 years and are eaten by many animals and bird species. This tree is not as common as the gamble oak, but when you find it, it is very distinct. I traveled to some of the lower elevations of Yavapai County for our last 2 species. The first one is Fendler hedgehog cactus, Echinocereus fendleri. So when you're looking for a scientific name that's easy, this is one. This columnar cactus is very small, typically not more than a foot tall. It does not grow into the high elevations and stays down below about 4,000 feet or so. That bloom color is magenta, and it is a beautiful cactus for Arizona when it blooms. This is Ocotillo Fukuora splendens. I took this picture because this one was very large and distinct. Again, lower elevations of Arizona, but within our county. This one was exhibiting the leafless structure, but still had enough energy to bloom these very orange and distinct blooms. They typically don't get taller than about 20 feet tall. They are prominent in southern Arizona, but stretch up into some warm mountainous areas. As long as it doesn't get below about 10 degrees in winter, Ocotillo can grow.